You think you know about holding a grudge. You think you understand political rivalries. But what if I told you there was once a feud so bitter, so pathologically insane, that it reached beyond the grave itself? This isn't just a story about a disagreement. This is a story of a pope who was so despised that his successor had his rotting 9-month-old corpse dug up from its tomb, dressed in sacred robes, propped up on a throne, and subjected to the most bizarre and horrifying trial in human history. You are about to discover the grotesque reality of the Cadaver Synod, a moment in history so depraved that the Church tried to bury it forever. From the ghoulish exhumation to the screaming accusations hurled at a dead body, from the horrific mutilation of the corpse to the supernatural chaos that followed, this is the story that proves even absolute holy power can descend into absolute madness. If you're ready to uncover the historical nightmares that textbooks are too terrified to print, hit that subscribe button, because we're about to open a tomb that should have stayed sealed forever. Let's be clear, this wasn't about justice. This was about a personal vendetta so toxic, it defied the laws of nature and God. Our story centers on two men, Pope Formosus, the victim, and Pope Stephen VI, the architect of this nightmare. While Formosus was alive, he was Stephen's political rival. But when Formosus died in 896, you'd think the rivalry would end. For Stephen VI, it was just getting started. When Stephen became pope a year later, he wasn't content with power. He was consumed by an unholy obsession with destroying his dead enemy's legacy. He couldn't challenge Formosus to a duel. He couldn't excommunicate a dead man. So he devised a plan so deranged, so utterly sacrilegious, that even his own cardinals thought he had lost his mind. He would put the dead man on trial. He would make a corpse answer for its crimes. This wasn't just politics. This was a psychosis festering in the highest office of the Christian world. In January of 897, Pope Stephen VI gave the order. Imagine the scene. Under a cold winter sky, workers were forced to enter the sacred papal crypts. The sickening thud of shovels echoed to the hallowed halls as they dug into the tomb of Pope Formosus. The stench of decay that filled the air was overwhelming. After 9 months in the ground, Formosus's body was in a state of advanced decomposition. We're talking about rotting flesh clinging to bone, eye sockets empty, skin turned to a leathery, blackened parchment. Servants, gagging and crossing themselves in terror, were ordered to pull the putrefied remains from the coffin. This wasn't an exhumation, it was a desecration. They were handling the decaying body of a man once considered God's infallible representative on earth, treating it like animal refuse. The man who once held the keys to heaven was now being dragged from his eternal rest to satisfy the petty rage of his successor. What happened next is one of the most surreal spectacles in human history. The rotting corpse of Pope Formosus was cleaned up as best they could, dressed in the magnificent, jewel-encrusted robes of the papacy, and propped up on a throne in the Basilica of St. John Lateran, the Grand Cathedral of Rome. Picture it. The entire Roman clergy, senators, and nobles forced to assemble and witness this macabre theater. On the throne sat a dead man, his head lolling to one side, his decaying face a grotesque parody of life beneath the glittering papal tiara. Pope Stephen VI screamed accusations at the corpse, his voice echoing through the silent hall. He accused the silent defendant of perjury, of ambition, of violating canon law. And here's where it gets even more insane. Because the corpse couldn't speak, a terrified teenage deacon was forced to hide behind the throne, his voice trembling as he squeaked out answers on behalf of the dead pope. Imagine the psychological horror. An entire room of powerful men, forced to pretend that they were participating in a legitimate legal proceeding with a rotting body. This was absolute power fused with absolute madness. Unsurprisingly, the verdict was guilty, but for the deranged Pope Stephen VI, a conviction wasn't nearly enough. He needed to physically annihilate his rival, in this life and the next. Standing before the decomposing corpse, Stephen ordered his guards forward. They seized the dead pope's right hand, the very hand that had given holy blessings to thousands of faithful followers. With a sickening snap of bone, they broke off the 3 fingers of benediction. The symbol of papal authority, now mangled and discarded, was kicked across the marble floor. But the horror wasn't over. They ripped the holy vestments from the corpse, leaving it naked and mutilated for all to see. Stephen then declared every act, every ordination, and every decree made by Formosus to be null and void, plunging the church into administrative chaos. Finally, the guards tied heavy weights to the savage corpse, dragged it through the horrified streets of Rome, and hurled it into the muddy Tiber River. A pope damned by a pope, and his body thrown away like trash. You'd think this would be the end, but Stephen's madness had gone too far. The people of Rome, who were already suffering from famine, were utterly horrified by the sacrilege. When a massive earthquake shook the basilica shortly after the trial, they saw it as a sign of God's wrath. Public opinion turned on Stephen VI with a furious vengeance. An uprising erupted in the city. The man who had put a corpse on trial was overthrown, stripped of his own papal power, and thrown into a lightless dungeon. He didn't last long. In July of 897, just months after his grotesque spectacle, Pope Stephen VI was strangled to death in his own cell. And what of Formosus? In a final, eerie twist, his body was reportedly snagged in fishermen's nets downriver. Monks, claiming they were guided by holy visions, recovered the mutilated remains. A subsequent pope, horrified by Stephen's actions, annulled the Cadaver Synod, restored Formosus' honor, and gave his brutalized body a proper, final burial. The man who claimed absolute power had become a victim of his own paranoid fantasy, a masterclass in how religious fervor, when twisted by pure hatred, can turn a holy man into something truly monstrous. If these dark secrets of the Vatican made you question everything, hit that subscribe button, because the horrifying truths that history tried to forget are the ones we live to uncover. And trust me, you haven't heard anything yet.